Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hunting Stories podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today we're actually going to hear a few stories from an old friend of mine, Braden Ford. Braden is a lifelong hunter. He's originally from Colorado, and he currently lives in Kansas. He's out there living his dream, hunting land that he not only owns, but manages for trophy game. I hope you enjoy the stories that he has to tell, but please keep in mind this was actually our first recording, and there may be a few quality issues. We're only going to be getting better, but beyond that, Braden is a unique individual who doesn't have internet or a computer at home. So we had to reschedule a few times, had to get a little creative in order to record our conversation. Either way, Braden's a great hunter, an even better human, with plenty of stories to tell, and we are very happy that he took the time to come on the show. So let's kick it off and hear some of Braden's best hunting stories. I'm going to sound corny here, but let's go ahead and kick it off, man. Thanks for jumping on. Braden, you're going to be the first person to actually tell a story on Hunting Stories. So we better be a good one. May not be episode 1, but you're at least the first recording.
All right, well, as long as we don't have to limit it to one story, we'll be all right.
Yeah, man, you can just go as long. Well, we got 40 minutes until Zoom kicks us off, but you have all that time. So go ahead, man, introduce yourself.
All right. I'm Braden Ford. I grew up with Mike, so to say. We went to high school together, went kind of our separate ways come college. And after college, I ended up traveling for a while, got married, and moved out to Kansas to follow my dream of being able to hunt and fish on my own property. One of my goals was to be able to shoot what I considered a trophy whitetail on my own place.
So how long have you been hunting, Braden? Like when did you start? When did your parents get you involved? Because I know that you're a multi-generational hunter here.
Yep. So I started hunting pretty much since I've been able to walk. I started out waterfowl hunting. I did a lot of waterfowl hunting, and I started going with my dad. And when you could take the Daisy BB gun, that you could watch the BB come out of the end of the gun in a looping arc, and it'd only go about 20 yards. So that's how I started hunting, was in waterfowl. And my dad would take me, and at the time, the neighbor across the street owned the property, and we were able to literally walk across the street and go goose hunting. So
That's amazing.
That was definitely pretty awesome for me.
And so now you're in Kansas, primarily whitetail. Would you hunt anything else out there right now? Turkeys or waterfowl?
Yep, I do it all still. My main focus is still more on the whitetail. When I first moved out here, one of the way I got to meet people is I volunteered to be a guide for the one-shot governor's hunt for the state of Kansas. And that was based out of El Dorado. And it actually worked out great for me. I actually met people who ended up offering me jobs out here. And I worked one full season at a hunting resort called Flint Oak. It's about 45 minutes away from me. That place is top of the line, first class place. And they do pheasant, quail. They got chucker, but it's all bird dogs for the most part. They do some turkey and deer hunting out there as well. But that's where I got to experience the upland game, the quail and stuff like that, because we have quail out here in Kansas that I had never experienced that in Colorado. So that was awesome. I got to work behind a dog. I got to learn how to work a dog. Just really opened my eyes to that, a whole nother side of hunting that I haven't done before this. And now I still manage to squeeze 3 or 4 quail hunts in a year. So
that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm an adult onset hunter, so I don't have experience with any of that stuff. So I'm going to have to come out and let you show me the ropes sometime.
Yeah, we'll definitely be able to work something out. And, I'm able to hunt waterfowl on my own property now. So that's a lot of fun for me. I'm looking forward to being able to take my boys when they get a little bit older. Hopefully, hunting and fishing is something that they're going to be interested in.
Hopefully, man. Hopefully, you've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I've got a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old, and hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers for the same thing. Went archery shooting with my boy today, and he couldn't have been more encouraging every shot. He's like, "Oh, Dad, you're the best ever." It was a pretty fun experience, and I think it feels to me like he's already hooked. But cool, man. Well, what stories do you have for us to sort of set the stage?
Well, I didn't get into archery until like right at the end of high school and when I was in college, the first part of college. And I actually shot my first deer in Colorado on public ground. Yeah, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I knew it was something I wanted to try. And so I went and bought a bow. The advice somebody gave me was walk into a bow shop, tell them what your price range is. Don't look at any of the names. Just shoot every bow you can in your price range and
Yeah,
then pick the one that feels the best.
that's pretty good advice.
And so that's what I did. Same thing with a release. And so I got a bow that worked really well for me.
Do you remember
I
what
shot,
bow it was?
it was a Bowtech Assassin.
There you go. You still have that bow?
And I don't, but I don't feel bad about it because I traded it to my brother-in-law and he still got it and he still loves it.
There you
And
go.
he has successfully shot animals with that bow.
There you
So
go. Sounds like it
it's
was a
still,
good purchase.
yeah, it's still in the family. So there's no hurt feelings there. Yeah, that it's been a phenomenal bow for both of us. But yeah, that first time I was up near Idaho Springs actually, and I had been hunting all over on public ground up there, and of course, like I hadn't seen anything. I couldn't, the only stuff I'd seen was 1,000 yards away across the valley. And by the time I made it over there, they were all gone. And I had been really diligent about practicing. I mean, like I had gotten a new bow, I had fallen in love with it.
Mhm.
I'd practiced and done everything I could to the best of my ability. And I just struggled and struggled. And one of my friends had just recently bought a place up there in Idaho Springs. And so he'd met people up there, and one of his friends called him and was like, "Hey, we got some deer over here. They're out here on the public ground." And I had a doe tag. So I grew up a meat hunter.
Mhm.
I grew up I had never had a buck tag in my life. I mean, I grew up hunting. I'd been hunting deer, antelope, elk, everything my entire life, and I had never had a bull tag or a buck tag or anything like that. My dad had told me we're meat hunters. It's what it is. Don't get caught up on the horns. You can't eat the horns, right?
Yep.
And so that's just what it was. That's how I was raised. That's how I hunted.
Makes it easier to eat tags, that's for sure.
It does that too. And yeah, nobody, when you shoot a doe, nobody questions it. Well, how many gray hairs did it have in its face? Was that a 5-year-old mature doe? No, I mean,
Yeah.
you shot a doe. Nobody cares. You don't get any of those questions.
Yeah. Congratulations. You filled your freezer.
Right, exactly. It's delicious. But anyway, so I get this phone call, and so my buddy and we jump in his truck, and we run across the valley over there, and sure enough, there's one up in there's a herd of them up there in the hills, and I get out, and I check my wind, and I'm able to circle around, and I got within 40 yards of this doe, and there was an old logging road up there, and Colorado, for somebody that might be listening that's not familiar, it's all like lodgepole pine, right? So it's really easy to
Mhm.
navigate around, and you can kind of hide behind each lodgepole pine as you move. And I'd when she put her head down to feed or something like that, that's when I would take my time to move, and I just move from one tree to another and just try to stay out of sight, try to keep my movement that she could see to a minimum. And I was able to get close enough, and I shot, and she ran, and I was like, oh no, what have I done? This is my first time ever taking a shot at a live animal with my bow, and I was so scared. Like I did I suddenly had this feeling of guilt. I'm just like, I hope I didn't wound it. I hope I didn't, I hope I'm gonna be
Yeah.
able to find this animal, because I had heard my arrow hit a tree. And so
Oh
I was
no.
like, oh no, exactly. That instant gut feeling where I'm just like, no. And so I just sat down and waited like 10 minutes. I just sat right there and was like, I just need to collect myself, pull it together. I mean, I'd never done anything like this. My adrenaline is just raging.
Got the
And
shakes.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, this is so much different than rifle hunting. I mean, rifle hunting and growing up a meat hunter, we did a lot of harvesting. There wasn't. I didn't get the shakes.
Yeah.
Like you picked out an animal, you took your breast like you were at the rifle range, you made a clean shot, and they either dropped or they ran up to 50 yards, and that was it. Like that, and that's all I'd ever experienced.
Hmm.
And so when this happened and she took off, I was and I hearing my arrow hit that tree, I felt like I'd made a giant error. Like I was. So I just sat down and waited, and finally I'm like, well, I guess I got to go find my arrow. And I went and found my arrow, and sure enough, it was stuck in a lodgepole pine, but it was covered in blood.
Oh, there you
And
go.
I couldn't actually get my arrow out of the tree. I had to unscrew the broadhead and leave the broadhead in the tree.
I've done that with a turkey before.
Yep. So I took my arrow, and of course I couldn't find any blood other than what was like on my arrow at the time. And so I was like, well, I kind of saw what direction she went, and so I walked down the hill, and I got to the logging road, and I kind of looked down the logging road, and I saw what I thought was like, what, that looks funny. That's like a wet spot or something down there. But so I walked down the logging road about 10 yards, and it looked like somebody had taken a 5-gallon bucket of blood and thrown it across the road.
Oh, wow.
And so then I just found my blood trail, and I followed it like another 15 yards, and there she was piled up. And when we cleaned her, I had made a perfect shot. I was using a Muzzy broadhead MX4, and I had shot her clean through the heart. So
Nice.
yeah, I was super stoked after that.
Yeah, I
And
bet, man.
I kept the heart in my freezer because I didn't know, and I was probably a little too proud. I
Yeah.
kept it so I could show my dad and some of my close friends, like, yeah, I made a heart shot. You know,
Nice work, man. Nice work.
so
Nothing wrong with being proud of all the hard work you put in, and then especially after scaring yourself and hearing that the arrow hit the tree.
oh
I
yeah,
when you said that, my gut dropped. I felt bad for you.
yep. And then so my next time really getting a deer after that with my bow was when we went to Kansas. And we talked before this, and I'd met Larry down in Dominican, and he had invited my wife and I to come to Kansas and hunt on some of his property. He had like three different properties that he owned, and then he had a couple of places that he had leased, and he was able to take us out, and it was phenomenal. My wife tagged out on day one within an hour of being in her tree stand, so that was incredibly awesome for her. It took me a little while longer to get a deer. I ended up having to stay like 6 days or something. And I mean, I can't believe Larry just let me. Like I hunted every day for 6 days straight,
Mhm.
and I was definitely spoiled. But one of those days he had some property leased real close to his house,
And this is
and he
this
called
is
it.
back in Kansas, not more Colorado hunting, correct?
Right. Yep. This is
Okay,
after I moved to Kansas. So I shot my first deer in Colorado, and then it was like 2 years after that we packed up and moved to Kansas.
gotcha. Okay.
And I had public land tags after I'd shot my first deer in Colorado, and just I was unsuccessful. So I had tag soup, short story. And so when I moved to Kansas, this is actually, we still lived in Colorado, but I was hunting in Kansas with Larry, and he took me out, and we went to this place, and he said, well, we're just going to tennis you in. And I was like, well, okay, what's tennis you in mean? And he's old school. He had trees, big walnut trees out here, and so they get kind of tall, and then they branch out about 15 yards up, and they'll turn into like a big bowl. And
Hmm.
so he didn't actually have ladder stands in some of these walnut trees. He just had the screw in steps that go up the walnut tree, and then he had screw in hooks to hang your bow on, and that's it. So you would just stand in this tree. And I'll never forget this hunt for as long as I live, because it had just rained. It had poured. And so everything was wet. The ground was soft. All of the dry leaves were no longer dry. so that nothing made a sound. Like it was quiet, it was still. I mean, you could hear the birds, but that was it. Like there weren't squirrels rustling leaves, nothing. And so we went out there, and he showed me where this tree was. I crawled up in the tree. I'd hung my bow up. I grabbed my cell phone to text my wife, be like, just got in the tree. I look up to my left. I am not kidding. There is a monster buck walking right at me. I haven't been in the tree 5 minutes. And I mean, this dude is, no, I wish it was. This dude is a monster. He is still probably the largest deer I've ever seen on the hoof in person.
If you had to guess, what would you score him?
Oh, he was 200 for sure. Like there's not a doubt in my mind. He was bigger than a lot of deer that you see killed on TV, but he did everything they did on TV. I mean, so he's walking in, the wind was out of the north. He was coming from the north, so he wasn't going to wind me. And he was walking right at my tree, and he had his head down, and his big old rack was just like sauntering, left to right, left to right. I mean, just like, you could just tell it was big, it was old. He just looked tired, and he was just had that slow walk saunter, and he walked right underneath my tree. I didn't even have an arrow knocked yet. So, as soon as he walks underneath me, he can't see me. So I'm grabbing my bow, and I get an arrow knocked, and he is right underneath me now. And I got my bow drawn, but I mean, I can't shoot because it's like a straight down shot. I'm still an amateur bow hunter. I don't know what's going on. So I got my bow fully drawn now, and he's starting to finally walk past me and walk kind of out and slightly up a hill, which is going to be perfect. And so I'm following him, and I'm bringing my bow up, and I'm at full draw. And I'm starting to look down my arrow and through my peep sights, full draw, and I'm still twisting, and I'm standing on branches. Again, I'm just standing on big branches up in this walnut tree. I'm not in a tree stand, and I'm turning with him, and I'm getting ready to shoot, and my elbow hits another branch behind me, and I pulled the trigger on my release. And I send that arrow. I mean, I wasn't on him at all yet. So I send that arrow right into the ground, 7 feet from the base of the tree. And he's or 7 yards from the tree, and he's 10 yards out from the tree. And of course he takes off. I mean, I guarantee you this is not the first time this bad boy's been shot at. So he knows what's up. And so he runs up the hill a little bit, and instantly then I know he catches my scent. I mean, and we scent down, we do everything we can to cover our scent, but fresh after a rain like that, and I'd just been in there, I know he winded me, and he stopped for that second and turned sideways, and I could see his full rack, and he's all majestic, and it's still kind of cool. Like you can still kind of see the steam rolling out of his nose. Yeah. And that'll forever be imprinted in my mind. And I don't think he ever saw me, but that was it. That was the game. And
game over.
Boom, he was gone. Never saw him again. And Larry actually saw him after I shot the ground. And Larry's like, yeah, that's a monster.
That's funny. Man. That's too bad. Did Larry ever see that deer again, or does he just get out of Dodge?
He got out of Dodge, and Larry never saw him again. We never found his sheds. I mean, nothing. And as far as we know, nobody ever shot him, because he was definitely big enough that if somebody shot him, Larry would have heard.
Somebody would know. Yeah. Yeah. He's still rolling those hills to this day.
Yeah. I don't know if he is or not, but yes, the dream lives on. I will tell you that.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. I mean, that's a good story. It's tough luck, but I can just see your elbow, and I can just feel the dread when that arrow goes. But at least you didn't wound him, left him for someone else, right? You're just that kind of guy. Right.
Yeah. As generous as I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, so absolutely. That was my first real encounter with a big buck that and it happened so fast, I didn't even get the adrenaline dump until after it was over. Like it was so fast. I mean, all of it happened in 90 seconds or less. And then of course, after he ran off, I was just like, we're done. I can't control myself. So I just stood in the tree until it got dark. But so that
Just
that was
totally
my first
defeated.
thing.
I could see you standing in that wet tree, just totally defeated.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
good image that you painted, man. It's interesting. I've never known of anyone that didn't have a tree stand that was just standing on a limb. So I was worried that you were
Yep.
gonna fall and like impale your leg or something like that. But I'm glad no one was injured.
Right. Yep. And that's the term, and I still use it to this day. I still have some trees that I just tennis shoe into.
That's
There's
awesome.
certain some of those big walnuts, just the way they grow, they can afford a natural tree stand type deal, because a lot of times in a tree stand anyway, I can't sit down the whole time I'm hunting. If
Mhm.
I'm going out for
Yeah.
an evening hunt, I won't ever sit down, because a lot of my setups is, if you sit down, you can't draw your bow from that sitting position.
Yeah.
You have to stand up. And just to clarify that, I live in Southeast Kansas. I live in the Flint Hills, so we don't always have a lot of really big trees. We got hedge trees. We got some oaks and stuff like that down in the creek bottoms. But if you're hunting an area that's not in a creek bottom, a lot of your trees don't get taller than maybe 30, 35 feet. There's a limited range of where you can really put a tree stand out.
Yeah. That makes sense. Gotcha.
But
All right, man. Well, do you have any other stories for us, or is that it for today?
oh, I got another one, because one of my goals when I moved to Kansas was to be able to shoot trophy deer on my own house, or on my own property. And there was one that I ended up getting shot. And I've had a friend who's been coming out. He used to be my neighbor in Colorado, and we met being neighbors. And he got into archery, and we used to bow hunt together. We did some public land bow hunting in Colorado. And of course, like, I had a deer tag, he had an elk tag. He saw deer, I saw elk. So we just saw the opposite of whatever we had.
Of course. Yeah.
Um,
Makes
so
sense.
nobody ever filled a tag when we went hunting together. But he started coming out when I moved to Kansas every single year. And so when I first moved out here, man, I was a whitetail junkie, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And I had like 20 game cameras, and I would go put them in up on walk-in property. And I was trying to talk to neighbors. People are very protective of their deer hunting out here on private ground. So it's kind of difficult to get permission to
Mhm.
go deer hunting out here. But once I moved out to the country and people started to know me and realized I lived here, I started being able to hunt more places, because I was a resident,
Yeah.
you know.
That makes some
Um,
sense.
so I mean, I'd look at 20,000 trail camera pictures a month, easy. I mean, I spent hours looking at trail cameras, and I've got some absolute giants on trail cameras now.
Mhm.
Um, but I finally started getting one below my house, and he wasn't a Boone and Crockett deer or anything, but he was a trophy deer. And so I had him kind of. I was trying to get my buddy that from Colorado. He lives in California now, but I was trying to get him out here, and I was trying to get him on that deer. So he hunted that deer pretty hard, and just never was able to make it work. I think he saw him once. As soon as he left, I started hunting, and I had a surgery coming up. I got my the artery in my left arm reconnected. So
Whoa,
I
hold
had
on. Hold on.
yes.
So your artery was disconnected. Let's go back to that just for
So
a second.
I had a coarctation when I was an infant, and to fix the coarctation in my heart as an infant, they used some of the artery out of my left arm.
Got
So
it.
growing
Okay.
up, the entire left side of my body was, I guess, undeveloped or less developed than the right side of my body,
Hmm.
because I just had less blood flow.
Got it.
So
Okay.
I would get like heart attack feelings, because when I would play sports or work out or do those things, I wouldn't get the blood flow to the left side of my upper body and my arm like most people would. And so I think they called it subclavian steel. And so my arm would ache because I would run out of oxygen for those muscles.
Hmm.
And so we ended up getting my artery reconnected to the main artery in my neck.
Got it. Okay. That makes a ton more sense. You don't often hear someone say, yeah, I had my artery reconnected. You got to find out where was the
Yeah.
disconnect?
So anyway, so I had just had that surgery done. I was still off work for having the surgery done. And I was sitting in a tree stand with my bow, of course, which I'm sure I'm not supposed to be. But it was right below my house. The steer had been in there. It was just one of those days. Nothing was going right, man. I had a bunch of does come through, and there was the old white-eared doe that instantly winded me, and then she would circle around and get farther away, and then she spotted me finally, and then of course she went into the whole deal of like stomping her feet and snorting, and I was just like, man, I'm so busted because every other deer that's coming by now, she's over there just pointing me out. And of course, she's standing where I can't shoot her. Otherwise, I'd have just shot her and ended the problem. But finally, she bugged off, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna get down. It's not even dark yet. I've got chores to do, cows to feed, and so I stand up and I take my arrow out of my rest, and I hook my bow up to the string to let it down out of the stand. And all of a sudden, two does come running right underneath me, and I'm like, oh, that's going to be a buck following them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look up and I turn real slow to my right, and sure enough, there he is. And I've had this deer on camera all summer, all fall, and I know he's just I'm hunting a draw right below the house, and I know he's been down there. I know he's been living in there. I'm hunting in between his bedding area and where he's going out to feed, and just trying to catch him. And I caught him. Here he comes. Yeah, he managed to. Of course, he doesn't come down the trail the does do. He's being old and smart, and he's staying away, and he's zigzagging back and forth on their scent trail. And so he zigs out on me, getting out about 25 yards from me, and he passes behind some trees, and I'm able to draw, and he steps out of those trees, and I managed to get a good shot on him and put an arrow in him. He never knew I was there. He was so focused on those does. And so he only ran maybe 20 yards, and he stopped again, and he was kind of standing behind a tree. So I just drew another arrow. He stepped out from behind those trees, and this was at about 35 yards, and I wasn't taking any chances. So I shot him again, and he ran maybe another 30 yards, and I could hear him crash in the creek. And so I didn't wait too long after that, because I knew he was down, because I'd heard him splash in the creek down there. And I was able to go and get him. He scored 160 inches.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome. And that was one of your lifelong goals, was to get a bruiser on your own property, man. Congratulations.
Yep. And so that was 3 years ago. So I lived out here. I lived in Kansas hunting on my own property. In the first 5 years I actually lived in Kansas, I never shot a buck. So, because everything we had come through, I don't know I don't know if it's right, wrong, whatever. But the problem with the game cameras is I knew what was out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to shoot a giant. And Larry's been a good advisor to me. He's like, man, there's a lot of deer that become very mature deer, 5-year-old deer, 6-year-old deer, that aren't going to break 150 inches. Like, the genetics aren't there. They're not going to do it. And Larry's rule has always been, if you get a mature deer, that's a trophy. I mean, What makes a 5-year-old deer with smaller antlers dumber than a 5-year-old deer with big antlers? Nothing. I mean, that's a trophy is a trophy, when you're shooting a mature buck. So I started to live by Larry's rules. Since then I've had pretty phenomenal luck. The last
lucky
3 years,
good, right?
Yep. So the last 3 years now, I've been very fortunate, and I've shot the 160-inch deer, I shot a 148-inch deer, and I shot a 152-inch deer this last year.
Man, that's awesome.
So I'm still, I still have dreams of getting into the 170s or the 180s, and they're out here, but I'm living by the rule of, you get a mature deer to walk underneath your tree stand, he's 5-6 years old, you shoot a mature deer, it's a trophy deer.
Yeah, so absolutely. Larry sounds like a smart gentleman, definitely a good whitetail mentor for you. So that's awesome, man.
Oh yeah, he's taught me lots of tricks and tips to be a successful hunter.
Well, here's what you got to
And
do,
I don't
Braden.
know.
You got to talk to Larry, and you got to get him on the podcast so that we can hear some of his stories, because I'm sure he's got some.
Yep, and fortunately, this is awesome now too. So Larry's come out to my place now, and I have since bought more property, and I have a lot more places to hunt. And Larry has now shot. I think he shot a 166-inch whitetail off me 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So, I feel really, really good about that, being able to, give back to somebody that took me under their wing and, have him come out and shoot a quality mature whitetail off of me and to be here for it. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a lot of fun. I mean, Larry is one of those people that he's just a kindred spirit when it comes to spending time outside.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's cool.
So
Cool, Braden. Well, awesome, man. Any more stories? These have all been pretty good.
not that I can think of offhand, really.
That's all right. That's right, man.
Yeah,
Not a big deal.
the only thing I got that's kind of off topic with the bow hunting was I've been working on trying to build a little bit of a waterfowl habitat on my watershed this last year, and I only got to hunt it once, but I was able to go out with a friend, and we shot our limit off my watershed in 45 minutes.
Yeah, you sent that video to me of that, like you kind of hosted a hunt that was put on YouTube or TV, or I'm not sure exactly where it was, but it looks like you're doing a lot of good work to your property for whitetail and obviously now waterfowl. So that's cool, man.
Yep, and that was a gentleman. I forget who he worked with, but he worked with Whitetail TV or Cabela's TV, and so that
Like
actually
Excalibur crossbows, right?
Right. Yeah, he was sponsored by several different people. He was sponsored by like Big and J, Excalibur Crossbows, yeah, a couple of those places. And so he's actually the nephew of the guy that owns the property across the street from me. And so that's how I met him. And he came out with, I think, very low expectations of finding a trophy deer, and we had just kind of hit it off. I'll send you the link. You can put it below, and these people can watch this hunt. But I actually filmed that entire hunt while he hunted. Yeah, when that was all over, he's like, "Man, this is awesome. How many deer have you shot like this?" And I was like, "I've never shot one close to this." And so like all of a sudden he was like, "Oh, I feel kind of bad." And I was like, "Man, that's just how it goes. Like, I live out here. I've taken people hunting out here, and a lot of them, it's just like I can go out. I put them in a tree stand. They'll sit in a tree stand their first time, just like my wife, for 2 hours, and they'll shoot a trophy buck, bigger than anything I've shot. I'm the one living out here, and I'm the one
putting in all the work. Yeah,
putting in all the work. But
funny,
it doesn't hurt my feelings. I'm very grateful to be able to do that. And a lot of the people that I let come out and hunt with me are first time hunters. Like, they're shooting their first whitetail ever with a bow.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I have a fixed rule, but I've managed to maintain the rule of thumb, I guess. And that is, nobody shot anything with a rifle on my place other than a kayak.
That's
so
awesome.
All the whitetail on my place have either been taken with a crossbow or with a bow. So
that's awesome. How many acres do you own total now?
About 320.
Okay, good for you, bud. Good for you.
So,
well, Braden, we did it, man. We actually are filling up the timer. We got 2.5 minutes before we're gonna get kicked out of this Zoom meeting. So I don't know, anything else you want to kind of finish with? Just anything you want to send the people off with, or maybe let them know where to find you, your Instagram, whatever it might be.
You can check me out on Instagram and see what I've been up to out here. It's Braden Ford 84 on Instagram. I'm doing everything from duck hunting to whitetail hunting, obviously, fishing. I've been working on my fishery as well, building structures. I've put wipers in my watershed now. I've been trying to get grass carp in there. I'm just a big kid that's got little kid dreams, I guess. So I'm just trying to fill them.
Good for you, man. Good for
I'm
you.
trying to build a place that my sons will enjoy growing up at. So, and enjoy their time outside. And
that's awesome, Braden. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I don't want you to get cut off mid-sentence, so I think we'll probably end it here. But we'll stay in touch. I bet you'll have more stories for me at the end of every season. So,
yep, and they'll be fresher, and they'll probably be better stories still. All right.
Sounds good.
I
And
appreciate
you got to
it,
connect
man.
with Larry too, buddy.
Yep. Great to stay in touch. So
All right, man.
we'll talk to
Thank
you
you.
later.
All right, guys, that's it. We're still playing around with the format, but another episode is in the books. If you have any feedback, please let us know. Just go to @HuntingStoriesOfficial on Instagram and DM us. Let us know what we're doing wrong, what we can do better, whatever it might be. And of course, don't forget to follow and share while you're there. Now, I hope you enjoyed the stories that Braden shared with us today. I've put his information in the show notes, so if you want to follow him on Instagram, check him out. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, review, comment on whatever your preferred podcast app may be. So Spotify, Apple, whatever you use. And don't forget to share the podcast with your friends. Finally, we're always looking for more storytellers. So if you, your dad, or your friend, whoever it may be, has a good story, hit us up. Let us know. We'd love to hear from every kind of hunter, as long as you can tell a good story. So thank you again for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Now go make some stories of your own. Thank you.